If you go on any forums or websites of X2x2s, inevitably the topic that will get discussed the most is the theology of 2x2s. What exactly their beliefs are about Jesus, God, the Bible, so forth. Now, you'd think that this group would have a pretty clear theology, since their religion is the fundamental, central component of their lives. But yet, the theology of this group is extremely vague. And so that's why when you go on these X2x2 forums, the debate over the theology is never ending, because you have some people saying that the 2x2s believe X, Y, and Z about something, and then other members or ex-members saying, no, that's not true. We have a minister over here who believes anti-X, anti-Y, and anti-Z about this issue. So it's a extremely vague and confusing situation to try to figure out what the theology of this group is. And so I don't want to spend time trying to figure out those topics again, because if you want to waste your time, go into some of these forums. However, there is a way to approach this idea of what is the 2x2 theology from a more meta level, to consider not what the 2x2s are saying particularly from their platform, from their podiums, but more importantly, what they're doing. So let's just start sort of from the beginning as best we can. So if you ask a 2x2, what's your theology? They will say, the Bible. And you say, well, that's very nice, but as you know, the Bible is actually a library of many, many books. And the books themselves are from different types of writings, right? There's prophecy books, there's so-called history books, there's poetry books, there's Revelation type books, right? There's these, apocalyptic type books and so forth. You can't just say, yeah, I believe the whole thing. It's just not true. Second, there's contradictions in not only the supposed historiography in the Bible, but also the messaging in terms of what to do. So, but the 2x2, they don't know this because they're very uninformed about their Bibles. They claim to have read their Bibles, and when you talk to a 2x2, you'll think they can spout a lot of scripture at you, but actually what they've got is, basically, call it 10, 20 different verses from the Bible that they've memorized over time from their ministers. And so they sound informed, but all these verses are, of course, always taken out of context in the very chapter they're in, let alone the historical context of them. So you're dealing with a very, very naive, uninformed person in a 2x2 regarding Bibles. So the idea that you're going to get some kind of consistent theology out of these people is laughable on its face. So let me just give you some examples about one thing that they will talk about. And you'll see in these forums, and this demonstrates the level of confusion, okay? And that is the topic of the divinity of Jesus. Okay, so just so it's clear, almost every Christian church believes that Jesus is God, that there's three forms of God, or three person heads of God. There's God the Father, God the Son, which is Jesus, and God the Holy Spirit. Okay? The only groups that do not believe this are Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Unitarian Universalists, and a few other very fringe groups. Okay? There is no major Christian denomination that believes anything other than this God in three persons. Okay, that's the key concept. Now, if you ask the 2x2 minister or congregant, they will tell you, yes, Jesus is God. Or they'll say, no, 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 Jesus was God, created by God. Or, so that means he's a God, but he's not God. Or they'll say, Jesus was born a man, but he did good things, and so he was made into a God by God. Or they'll say, Jesus was born a man, he lived a perfect life, and he was given immediate passage into heaven. Okay. Now, all of these things can't be true, right? Because they're obviously contradictions. But if you press a 2x2, you're going to get one of these answers, and it's not going to be consistent. You will get these different answers from the same person on the same day. Even there's simply no way to kind of nail them down on what they believe on this. However, if you say, well, look, do you believe in the Trinity? Which is, of course, what I said earlier, what every Christian denomination believes, they'll immediately say, no, we don't believe in the Trinity because that's a Catholic thing. Now, of course, it's not a Catholic thing, it's a Christian thing. And like I said, every Christian denomination believes this. So it has nothing to do with Catholicism. But for them, the idea of Trinity, but even though when you tell them, you explain the Trinity in terms of God in three persons, do you believe this? Oh, yes, we believe that. Again, this level of confusion is remarkable. So that's why trying to discuss the theology of the 2x2s is just a lost case. I believe the more interesting question, which I said is the meta level question, is to ask, do the 2x2s, are they actually a Christian group? Like, do they believe in the central components of Christianity? I'm going to make the assertion that they do not. They're not actually a Christian group. So here's my argument. If you are a member of the 2x2s, you will have figured out that there are a lot of rules about what you should do with your life. Now, these rules, of course, are unwritten, as is everything in the 2x2s. They have no written doctrine of any kind. That's what makes it so difficult. The only thing you can go on is what are some consistent, near universal norms in terms of behavior or statements that you hear within the 2x2s. That are the only things you can say, yeah, that must be their doctrine. Okay, so one of the consistent things we see in 2x2ism is legalism across behavior and dress, right? So women are supposed to have their hair in a certain manner. Women are supposed to refrain from any forms of jewelry. Women are supposed to dress in a certain manner. Men are supposed to have their hair in a certain manner, and so forth. Also, in terms of behavior, there are certain occupations which are forbidden. There are certain activities which are forbidden. There are certain holidays, Christian holidays, which are forbidden. And there are certain types of reading material, Christian reading material in particular, and philosophy, which is forbidden. So when you go through all of these rules that the 2x2s impose upon their congregation, you realize this is a highly legalistic entity. And so you think, well, that's odd because Christianity, as created by Jesus, is anti-legalism. In fact, Jesus makes it clear when he says that there are two great commandments. One is love God with all your heart, and second is to love your neighbor as yourself. I've come to fulfill the law, and so forth. And this is the idea that legalism is dead, because legalism is what the Hebrews were. That's the system they had built. They had, I think, 631 laws governing everything about your life, from what you could eat, when you go to sleep, who you could talk to, who you could shake hands with, on what days, everything. That was an extremely legalistic system. Of course, Jesus is doing away with that. And we even see that in the writings of Paul when he's discussing, even with the other disciples, about the laws of the Hebrews and how that they have to end, particularly the law about circumcision for one, but also eating with Gentiles and so forth and so on. So if you understand that the Hebrew religion is legalism, it is actually the greatest example of legalism we know of. And Christianity is anti-legalism, the complete antithesis. And that's the whole point of Christianity, is to not be legalistic. In a Christian religion, there are no rules about what you can and can't do, particularly. There are guidelines, meaning it's probably better to do this and that because you won't get yourself in a bad situation. But really, Christianity is about free will and using your own cognitive abilities to choose the most prudent path. So let me give you some examples of how a Christian would think versus a 2x2. So the 2x2 are forbidden from drinking alcohol. I mean, it is not exactly the case all over the world, but it's almost universal, and so we'll have to use it as an example. Christians are not forbidden from drinking alcohol. Christians are to create in themselves the habit of consuming alcohol in a temperate fashion, meaning, yes, have a glass of wine with your meal, but do not get inebriated. Right? Do not get drunk, because then you will lose control. You lose cognitive control of yourself. So is gains. You have free will, but act in a prudent manner. And in 2x2s, no alcohol at all, not even a teaspoon. So that's a legalism versus Christian system. Another example, dancing. 2x2s forbidden to dance. It doesn't matter what kind of dancing. Square dancing, line dancing, ballet, it doesn't matter. It's all forbidden. Christians, you can dance. In fact, there are many Christian dances. The issue for Christians is to use your prudence to dance in ways that do not lead to bad outcomes. What kind of dancing would that be? Well, maybe things like salsa dancing or tango dancing or other types of highly sexualized dancing, right? Because what would be the bad outcome? Well, you might engage in fornication or in infidelity or adultery, right? Depending on the situation. So it's again, use your God-given cognitive skills to make a prudent judgment. Now, being a legalist, life's pretty easy because you have the laws, the rules. You just follow the rules. You don't have to think. Just, oh, dancing, I don't go there. Someone's drinking alcohol, I don't go there, right? Whatever the rule, the 2x2s, all their little rules, you obey them, you're good. You're going to heaven, apparently. The Christian, he's like, no, I have to, every situation I have to use my head. I have to think about it. I have to decide, is this prudent? Is that not prudent? Every situation has slight nuances to it. Now, the difference between these two systems is readily apparent when you understand something else, and that is the Hebrew religion, they have no concept of the afterlife. So it's a misconception. Most Christians don't know this, but the Hebrews, their religion was not a salvation religion. Their religion was a contractual religion, a covenant, meaning that if they obeyed all these laws, then God would bless them in the here and now, in the present, and they would receive good things. So what are good things? Well, the crops would grow, the rain would fall, their enemies would be defeated in battle, that kind of stuff. It's not about something good happening in the afterlife. There is no afterlife for Hebrews. For Christians, we don't really think like that. There's no Christian saying, if I do all these good things in the present, I'm going to have blessings in the present from God. That is not how it works. In fact, many Christians say the opposite. Suffering in the present is normal. but you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. Now, the 2x2s have taken a piece from each of this. Obey the laws in the present, and you'll be rewarded in the afterlife, right? So think how bizarre this is. With Jews, at least if you're obeying the laws and you're not being rewarded, you can say, yeah, this is not working out. I better shut this off. But for 2x2s, they can be obeying the laws, not being rewarded in the present, and they're supposed to wait for the afterlife for this to get better. Well, when the afterlife comes, you're already dead. There's no return on this, no refund, right? Too late. So a very, very confusing situation. Now you may think that a legalistic system, what's so bad about that? Well, they go horribly off the rails. I will give you some examples of a current legalistic system that is absurd. That is, amongst ultra-Orthodox Jews or even Orthodox Jews, they, of course, are not allowed, in the contemporary world, are not allowed to work on Saturday or their Sabbath. So if there's any kind of work being done, they have to pay someone to do it for them. Okay, so again, the law for them is they're not allowed to work, but they get around this by paying someone to do the work for them. Okay, so they're not violating the law. Of course, they're violating the spirit of the law, but not the letter of the law. Now, in terms of work, what are we talking about? Well, it just so happens that turning on a light switch is a form of work, right? So they're not allowed to turn on light switches on Sabbath. They have to pay people, other people, non-Jews, to turn on the light switches for them. Now, a clever, enterprising Jew has come up with the idea of a kosher light switch, which is a switch that when you flip the switch on it, it doesn't 100% of the time turn on the lights. It has a circuit board inside, which has a randomizer, and so sometimes it doesn't turn on the lights. Very infrequently, but not 100%. And therefore, the ruling by the rabbis that this light switch, because it doesn't have a one-to-one causation of you flipping the switch, it turning on the lights, therefore it's not work. And therefore, it doesn't violate the law of not doing work on the Sabbath. So you can have that in your home and you can use it for the Sabbath. Now, if that's not absurd, I don't know what is. There's no possibility that the Christian religion would come up with something like that. But unfortunately, there are people who call themselves Christians that have come up with things like that. And this is one of the things the 2x2s have done. Now, they don't have a kosher light switch, but they have all kinds of other restrictions, or have had in the past, which are absurd. Okay, one of them is radios. For a large section of the United States, it was forbidden to have a radio. And so 2x2s, if you bought a car, cars generally came with radios, they'd have to have the radio removed. Or they'd have to special order a car with no radio. Now, it didn't matter where you lived. Maybe where you lived, there was only one radio station, irrelevant. The fact is, just having the physical radio was the problem. Okay, so these are the sort of absurd things that happen when you're in a legalistic system, like the 2x2s. Now, how does this relate to something else about their theology, which is baptism? Well, their baptism is very bizarre because they believe that you must be baptized into the 2x2s, meaning that if you come from another Christian denomination, whatever, Anglican, Lutheran, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, doesn't matter. You come to the 2x2s and you join, you will have to be rebaptized. Now, they'll have all kinds of reasons for this. They'll say, well, you were baptized as an infant in your other denomination, and therefore it wasn't your own choice, and we want this to be your own choice. And there are some reasonable arguments, some credible arguments to that, because we hear that in some other fundamentalist Christian groups. This is called the born again Christian stuff. But the 2x2s, they don't just insist on this if you were baptized as an infant. They insist on this no matter when you were baptized, adult or infant, meaning that even adult baptism in the Catholic Church is not valid according to 2x2s. Right? You've got to be rebaptized by a 2x2 minister. That is the key thing. Baptized by a 2x2 minister. No other baptisms are valid in the eyes of the 2x2s. Okay. So again, this is highly unusual. This is really the only happens in cults. There is really no Christian denominations that insist on this except for cults. And that is again a reflection of their legalism, right? Because if it was Christian baptism, you would be baptized into Christ. So a baptism done in any other Christian denomination would be considered valid. But no, they're baptizing you into the 2x2s. So that's a legalistic component of this. So that's, again, we've been talking now for a few minutes. I want to point out that I haven't spoken about some written doctrines of 2x2s. I'm just talking about what we see them doing on a consistent and near universal basis. That's the only way to figure out what the actual doctrines are. Because there is no written doctrines. There are no books. There are no websites. You may find the notes that someone took at a 2x2 convention or meeting where something was said by a 2x2 minister, but these notes may or may not reflect reality. And the 2x2 minister the next day could have said completely the opposite. So this is the problem. So the 2x2 theology at its root is a legalistic system. It is not Christian. It looks Christian on the face of it because they talk about Jesus, they have the New Testament, but in reality, it is a legalistic system, and therefore it is the antithesis of Christianity. It is not Christian. In fact, this may sound strange, it is a neo-Hebraic system or neo-Judaic system, which is very odd because the 2x2s, some of them believe their religion goes all the way back to Jesus, it doesn't, but some of them will admit the truth and say their religion goes back to the early 20th century, and therefore it's a restorative religion, meaning kind of restored to the New Testament church, so to speak, or early church, so to speak. Now, it's not a restorative Christian movement at all. It's a restorative Hebraic or restorative Judaic movement. When you have all this legalism, there's nothing Christian about that at all. Yes, you may talk about Jesus, you may read the New Testament, many things. You may use words, phrases of the New Testament, but that doesn't make you a Christian group or having to do with Jesus's actual main ideas, which they don't. And if you attend enough 2x2 meetings where there's ministers speaking, you'll notice they speak a lot from the Old Testament, which is strange because you rarely hear so much Old Testament speaking in major Christian denominations. There are some readings, but it's not the focus. Where in the 2x2s, you'll get only a sprinkling of New Testament, a lot of Old Testament, which is, again, gives you a hint of what's really going on. So I hope that's helpful. 2x2 theology, hard to figure out, but certainly it is not Christian.